watching this video. Today we're going to look at the question of a hadith that is in Sahih al-Bukhari. It's hadith number 4790, where Umar, one of the Prophet's companions, said, and the second caliph, says something controversial. Now, this is narrated by like 6 people, but he basically tells the Prophet that you are letting good and bad persons. But in Arabic, he uses the word Fajir, which is a very extreme bad. And it's controversial because it's sort of like, how is this, how is Omar telling the Prophet what he should and shouldn't do, and basically saying that very wicked, evil people are entering his house and seeing his wives like up close. But also what's controversial is that in Sahih al-Bukhari it sort of alludes that his saying this is what caused the verse, the Quranic verse, to be revealed. So we're going to look at the question of, should the use of the word Fajir be considered disrespectful to the Prophet? And did Omar have anything to do with the revealing of this Quranic verse? So we start by looking at the use of the word Fajr. Those are the disbelievers, the wicked sinners. Fajara here is in the Quran translated as wicked sinners. The sinful man. Do not befriend a sinner. So the word is very heavy, right? It's like telling someone, why are you letting a bad person in your house? And it's also saying, why are you letting like an evil, horrible, the worst kind of worst in your home? And to the person that you're saying it to, it kind of says something about them, because why is their judgment such that they're letting this happen? And not only bringing these kinds of people in their home, but that those types of people are seeing or talking to their wives, right? So how does the Quran teach us on how to speak to the Prophet? It says, do not raise your voice, address him by his honored titles, which here he does in the hadith, kindly and respectfully. So I mean, this is the Prophet of God, and Omar is supposed to be one of his most trusted, companions according to Sunni scholars. There's a lot of doubts and controversies about whether or not that's actually true. But imagine going into your boss's office and talking to him in such a way. Why are you letting these bums in your office? Now, if those people are in the boss's office, then they inherently deserve a certain level of respect, because the boss is the one who let them in. And also, if there's a disagreement about the judgment of the boss, the way that you would expect somebody to do it is say it in a very sort of calm and relaxed way, like, excuse me, boss, how do you feel about maybe adjusting, about changing something? How do you feel about this? Doing it in a very sort of indirect way. It says, speak kindly and respectfully. So, whether the use of the word Fajr is disrespectful, I mean, based on what I've researched here, I think that it is very odd and disrespectful that somebody like Omar, who used to be an idol worshiper, and he actually plotted to kill the Prophet, There are citations where Omar, before he accepted Islam, that he would beat his slave every single day until he got tired, because the slave um, was looking into the Quran and looking into Islam. He beat his sister. He's quoted as beating his sister and his brother-in-law for accepting Islam. He's somebody who's said to have priorly made a idol god out of dates, and then when he was hungry, he ate the dates. So he ate his idol god. He's someone who's always been sort of described by Sunni and Shia as a large person with a very hot temper. So for someone to come from basically at one point wanting to kill the Prophet, and being an idol worshiper, and then being embraced by the very same Prophet, forgiven, brought into Islam, it seems odd that he would use the word Fajir. And also basically speak in a way that the Prophet was, God forbid, like not upholding the honor of his wives. Because this is what he's really saying. He's saying, look, don't you want to, clean up a little bit? Why are you letting these bums in the house so that they can see your wives? Like, don't you have any honor for your wives? I mean, this is what I gather. Now, anybody who's watching this video is welcome to comment, but this is what I gather, because the word Fajr is a very particular word. And this is no way to speak to the Prophet. And Omar, if he was the trusted companion that so many Sunni scholars say he is, I would think that he would have used a different approach. Now, why does Bukhari insinuate that his saying this had anything to do with the revealing of verse 53 of chapter 33, Surah Al-Ahzab? The verse is, O you who believe, enter not the Prophet's house unless permission is given to you for a meal, and then not so early as to wait for its preparation. But when you are invited, enter, and when you have taken your meal, disperse, without seeking familiar talk. Such behavior annoys the Prophet. He is ashamed to dismiss you, but Allah is not ashamed to tell you the truth. And when you ask his wife for anything you want, ask them from behind a screen that is purer for your hearts and for theirs. Nor is it lawful for you to hurt Allah's messenger, nor to marry his wives after him ever. Truly that in Allah's sight is a monstrous thing. So in here it clearly states, taking your meal. Now what is this verse referring to? It's overwhelmingly agreed upon that this verse is based on when the Prophet, peace be upon him, married Zainab bint Jahsh. And he was having a marriage feast. And some of the companions, after the food was done, they stayed until like late into the night. And the Prophet wanted them to leave. They were just sitting there, like chatting, and it says here, expecting the guests to leave. The few companions stayed behind. Most guests departed after the meal, but a few companions stayed behind, engaging in conversation. This made the Prophet uncomfortable. He left the room thinking they would leave. He comes back, they're still there, and they stayed. After a considerable part of the night had passed, these companions finally leave. So the verse was revealed based on this event, the walima, or the marriage feast of his marriage to Zainab bint Jahsh. It had nothing to do with what Omar said here. So I'm confused, like, why Bukhari would even allude to this. And we have to understand Bukhari began narrating several hundred years after the Prophet passed, under the Abbasid Caliphate, during which there was a lot of political tension between Shia and Sunni schools of thoughts. Nobody has any evidence that that's what impacted his collection, but nevertheless that was the case. Now, all Bukhari did is generally like compiled sayings by companions and listed the chain of conversation. Uh, he didn't explain these hadiths. He didn't do what the tafsir. The tafsir, the explanation, was done by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in his famous in the well-known book called Fath al-Bari. And so when you go to the explanation of this hadith in Fath al-Bari, it references this hadith, but also another one where Omar essentially, it's written in a way where he claims that 3 verses in the Quran were revealed because of something that he said. At least that's how Bukhari quotes it. But in Fath al-Bari, it gives a clearer explanation that that wasn't the case at all. In Fath al-Bari, for example, here's the Arabic and English says, Omar said this out of humility, for he knew that there was no special privilege for him in this regard, and that Allah had also agreed with other companions on other issues. The meaning of agreement is that Allah had decreed this eternally, and Omar's proposal happened to coincide with the truth. The agreement is not causality. Omar did not cause revelation, but his view coincided with Allah's pre-eternal knowledge and decree. So basically what they're saying, they're giving a more in-depth explanation and saying that all this hadith is saying is that something happened and Omar at some point thought about it or talked about it, and then the verse was revealed in the Quran. So Omar was kind of saying, like, you know, when he said ma wafaqtu, that here in this hadith, Bukhari 402, my Lord agreed with me in 3 things. What he's saying here is not that he did something and then it was revealed in the Quran. There was no causality. What he's saying is that he had thought about these things and they ended up happening in the Quran anyways. Okay? So Omar's statement is one of humility. Agreement is not causality. It's like, you know, you have an idea about something and then a company actually develops the idea and you're like, oh, well, I had the idea, but you didn't cause that. I mean, the company did it. You didn't do it. The company did it. So this is the key distinction. And I think many Sunnis are misguided in thinking that Omar's status was such that things that he would say to the Prophet or do ended up, you know, moving God in a way that he sent down the angel Gabriel to make it an official Quranic verse. That is absolutely not true. Okay? And even we have to look at all of these hadiths in Bukhari with a level of skepticism, because this specific hadith, for example, has a chain of 6 individuals to get to Imam al-Bukhari. So basically, Anas ibn Malik is saying that he heard Omar say this, and then Anas told Humayd, which was a student of Anas, and then Humayd told Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, a leading hadith scholar, and Yahya told Musaddad ibn al-Basri, which was the Imam al-Bukhari's teacher, and Imam al-Musaddad, Imam al-Bukhari's teacher, told him. Now imagine, and you're welcome to try this in real life, but imagine narrating something to someone and have it go through 6 people and see how accurate it arrives to the ear of that 6th person. And this is in 2025, where we have so much digital technology where we could preserve a saying, you know, with email or something and keep a chain. But, you know, we're talking about back then when there was vast distances to be covered and, you know, just a very shrewd way of writing things down on paper. So you have to. I think it's fair to take anything in Bukhari with a grain of skepticism. And that's it. I wanted to just answer this one question that was said in a conversation by Sheikh Ala and add some more explanation for English speakers. Thank you.